So only 2 games to go now, and Carlsen faces Dmitry Andreikin, a very strong Russian grandmaster in the penultimate round. So a quick recap of the standings. Let's bring them to the front here. So yeah, Carlsen in this massive pack of people on 9 points, and it's clear that he has to win both games. I mean, anything else is impossible for him to finish on the podium. And with a bad tiebreak, he has to finish in the top 2. He can't have 3 people finish with 11. Has to have him and only one other person, and then he can go to the match. So that's Carlsen's chance. But to have that chance, he has to beat the very talented Dmitry Andreikin, a former World Cup finalist and a very strong Grandmaster 2700 player for many years. But Carlsen does have the white pieces. And this time around he opens with e4. We have e5 and we go to the Ruy Lopez. And Andreikin plays the Berlin, knight to f6. Anti-Berlin by Carlsen, plays d3, he's not taking on c6 and e5. Sorry, not castling and allowing knight takes e4. Followed by rook e1 at some point, taking on c6. Bishop c5, and now a very rare move, most common move is c3 here, which intends to give the bishop a square to go to. Even if it goes to a4 or c4, usually a4 it goes to c2. But Carlsen plays bishop a4 immediately, unprovoked. And yeah, this is a rare move because usually people wait for black to go a6. But Petroleko during the broadcast, he mentioned that, he knew about this move, and he said that he thought it was, at least good for 1 or 2 games as a surprise weapon, maybe even more. So yeah, this is something that entered Carlsen's radar, and he decided to use it for this game. Castles and castles, d6 and c3. So white is ready to put this bishop on c2 if black is to harass the bishop. And white is also ready to harass black's bishop, so now we have preventive measures. Bishop back to b6, knight b to d2, and now we have this typical maneuver in the Italian, placing the knight on g6. But Carlsen is going after this bishop. He wants to have the bishop pair. Knight g6, h3, h6, and the bishop comes back to c2, which of course protects the e4 pawn and enables white in some lines to go d4. Bishop to e6, and now Carlsen takes on b6. Having put the bishop back on c2, he's now ready to push d4. Note that black can never take on a2, be it with a rook or a bishop, because the bishop will always be trapped, and you will not get it out. Even a much worse version than what Fischer had in the famous game against Spassky. But b5 now by Andreikin. Bishop comes out c6, rook to e1, queen c7, and now finally a3. So getting ready to move the rook, and now white doesn't have to calculate on every move if black can take on a2, which of course he couldn't do up to now. Rook a to d8, queen to d2. So for now, both parties are simply centralizing their pieces. This is what you do after the opening. Put your queen out on a moderate central looking square, and then place your rooks on the central open files. Queen e7 by Andreikin, and queen c1 now by Carlsen, anticipating action on the d file when you don't want the queen to be in harm's way here. Knight to h5. A typical idea when you have a knight on d6, you put the other one on h5 and you are ready to jump into f4. So at the moment, even though white has the bishop pair, black's position looks a little bit more menacing because of the knight being able to jump into f4 pretty soon. Carlsen took on e5, took on d8 and played rook d1. So it seems like he wants to go for the endgame where he hopes to make use of his bishop pair, and also he's reducing black's ability to attack by eliminating some heavy pieces. Knight jumps into f4 and now king h2. Of course this is protecting h3 from any sacrifices, but also it's preparing in some lines what you will see soon. After rook takes d8, queen takes, Carlsen offers a trade, and now queen c8, and now black really threatens to take on h3. Take with the bishop, take with the queen, and then checkmate on g2. So king h2 enabled white to go now knight g1, protecting h3. And after bishop to f7, maybe black could have made a better waiting move here, because now white is ready to push him with g3. The knight goes back to e6, and now h4. Stopping black from going knight g5, and also in some lines getting ready to just push to h5, kick the knight away. Although at the moment this is the most solid pawn structure for white, so the pawn at the moment is going to stay on h4. And here Andreikin obliges and goes for the endgame that Carlsen so much craved with the bishop pair. But at this point Andreikin thinks that he should be able to hold here. I mean, we do have a fairly, you know, not symmetrical but similar pawn structures. Both sides have the same pawns on the king side, 4 pawns. Then we have 3 on the queen side, although black's pawn structure is a little bit more vulnerable with the double pawns, and some weaknesses on the dark squares. So Carlsen gets the knight back into the play. It finished its job on g1, which was to protect h3. Knight f8, knight to d2, and now g5 by Andreikin. He doesn't want to just sit and wait. And now Carlsen decides to open up the position for his bishop pair. He plays f4, intending to blow things open here. But Andreikin is happy to trade off a bunch of pawns and play knight to g6. So if we take now on h6, he takes on h4, and black is happy that we have more pawns off the board. But Carlsen, he would rather bring his king into the game and give up the bishop pair. That's indeed what he does. And black decides to bring his king towards the center. So at the moment, white has a better king and some further advanced pawns, which gives him a space advantage. But is this enough to win? Because, well, Carlsen has to win this game. He now plays e5 to increase the scope of his king. Once we eliminate these 2 pawns, given the right circumstances, now the king has entry towards the king side. But to do that, you'll have to attack this weakness on h6 and make black occupy some pieces defending it. So he brings the knight into the game, and now knight f2, getting ready to attack here. Bishop e6, bishop to f5, blocking the g4 square, enabling now knight to g4, hitting the pawn. The pawn advances to h5, king comes to f6, and now Carlsen goes for the knight endgame. And remarkably, this is very difficult for black to defend and might even be lost. This knight is coming to g3, attacking the pawn on h5. So king f6, knight g3, and king to g6. But now a waiting move by Carlsen, b3. He has the more flexible pawns here. He plays b3, and he can more easily wait and play a waiting move. And here Andreikin has to let him in. He plays knight h6. He wants to go for counterplay, but it turns out it's probably too little too late. The king comes into d6, knight to e3, And his idea is if king c7, knight check and take the pawn. But Carlsen doesn't mind, and he plays king c7. And turns out, well, if you take this pawn, I'm basically taking all of them here. So c5 was instead played, king takes b7, c4. Okay, trying to fix this pawn, praying for a pass pawn of his own after knight d1, but Carlsen simply defends knight to e2. Andreikin goes for the counterplay, but white is winning this race. King c6, king g4, takes, and now the a pawn starts running, and it's simply too fast. We have 1, 2, 3 moves, and the bad news is that you also cover the queening square. So 1, 2, 3, and yeah, you're one move behind, and the queening square is covered. So black has to try something else. He played knight to e3, a6, knight to d5, hoping for something like this, but it's again too late. In the game he played h4, but if you play this, you're also too late. I am in time to take your knight. King takes, h3, king b8, and once again I am covering the queening square. So after a7 instead, h4 was played, hoping for queens when black plays knight c7 check, but no such luck today. h3 and Carlsen queened, which prompted Andreikin to resign. So wouldn't you know it, Carlsen is back in the hunt. And after this win and 14 rounds of chess, we have Daniil Dubov with 10.5, the surprise leader, followed by more usual suspects in Mamedyarov, Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen. And also we have Vladislav Artemiev, a very strong blitz and rapid player. One of those endless supply of Russian GMs. So yeah, now the situation for the last round, and it's almost like in a fairy tale. Carlsen is mounting the comeback. Dubov has the black pieces against Mamedyarov. Carlsen has the black pieces against Nakamura, and Artemiev has the black pieces against Karjakin. So if Magnus manages to win against Nakamura in the last round, he is getting his match for the championship if Mamedyarov doesn't lose against Dubov and Karjakin doesn't lose against Artemiev. And the good news for Magnus is that both Mamedyarov and Karjakin have the white pieces, and Karjakin hasn't lost a game in this tournament. The Minister of Defense. So a dream last round where Magnus can secure a match for the title. Can you believe it, after the horrendous start? So yeah, that was the penultimate game, and I'll see you in round 15, Nakamura against Carlsen, for all the marbles. See you then.